All right, so now we're going to jump into the three topics. Social Security is probably the longest of the bunch, and I'm going to walk through kind of a methodical way of looking at Social Security and really ways that I know you can fix it because it comes down to math. Social Security there should be an easy political solution. And again, I don't understand why it hasn't been addressed. This was just a headline from last Friday. And if you read the Wall Street Journal, this is a headline you probably see, at least monthly, maybe weekly, as some sort of article that discusses that the reserves in Social Security will be depleted. This is usually designed to scare people that your money's not going to be there, because obviously that's a big concern for retirees and the next generation of retirees, is that if they're planning on living off of Social Security, you want the money to be there, and we all should want the money to be there. So the reality is there are ways to fix it. So let's just kind of unpack what this is going to look like here. So just go through some of the data that comes out from SSA.gov. In 2020, about 65 million Americans will receive over $1 trillion of benefits. So that's the current payout structure. And so some interesting facts. In 1940, the life expectancy of a 65-year-old was 14 years, and today it's over 20 years. And the reason I'm mentioning that is, there's a lot bigger strain on Social Security because life expectancies have gone up. So it means the system has to pay out for a longer period of time. By 2035, the number of Americans 65 and older will increase from approximately 56 million today to over 78 million. And there are currently 2.8 workers for each Social Security beneficiary. And by 2035, there will be 2.3 covered workers for each beneficiary. So these are kind of the things leading to why the Social Security trust fund is going to break, is because the demographic shifts, the amount of people that are going to be collecting, the amount of money in reserves. It's a mathematical equation. They know, we see it happening. This is not a mystery. It will happen. Now, I've always kind of joked that the government has a printing press. They literally can print money and send you checks. So I'm highly skeptical that we're not going to make good on these payments to Americans. I do believe we're going to make good, even if they don't fix it. But it's like, why not fix it? This is actually not that complicated. So just some basic info in case you're not super familiar with how these payroll taxes. And so Social Security is paid for through payroll taxes. The wage base, which means how much of your wages will be subject to Social Security and Medicare expenses. The cap is at 147,000, which means zero of income all the way up to 147. You're going to be paying these taxes. Once you get over that, you're no longer paying into Social Security. And you can see the different breakdowns. Basically, the Social Security, which is here kind of stated as old age and survivors insurance, is 10.6%. The disability component, 1.8%. And then Medicare 2.9. So that all adds up to these payroll taxes, with the lion's share going into the Social Security benefits. Now, Social Security hasn't been around forever. I believe it was enacted in 35, 36, first collected in 37, I believe. So it was not a major source of revenue. And initially, the combined payroll tax was at 2%. That's where it started, not north of 10% now. And it raised about 580 million that year, which in today's dollars would be about 10.3, or excuse me, in 2019 dollars, it'd be about 10.3 billion. But in 2019, the taxes that were collected equated to 914 billion and represented 26% of total federal receipts. So you can see what it's grown from its infancy and what it was collecting at the time to now the amount of money that's being collected. And so pretty significant amount of federal taxes that are being collected for Social Security payments. And if you start looking at the breakdown, on the left-hand side, it shows the sources, meaning the money that's getting paid out. Where is it coming from? And then and you can see majority right now is just coming from the payroll tax collected, a little bit of interest, some taxation benefits on Social Security benefits. And then on the right-hand side, it shows uses. Where is this money going? Where is this $1 trillion? And the lion's share of it is going to benefits payment, not a lot of administrative expenses around this. And so pretty standard. So the good news is most of this is coming from payroll taxes, not as a depletion of our reserve. Well, we last year in 2021, we started actually dipping into the reserves for the first time. So that's why this headline is not going away. That's why this is an important topic, because we're not talking about peanuts here. This is a lot of money, $1 trillion of spending, $1 trillion of taxes. This needs to be resolved because this is putting, this is quite a large expense for the average American. And if we run negative, then what? Then the people who are still living are going to be having to pay this out of their paychecks. Kind of that next generation is going to have to front this. So that's why it's important to address it today, because you can fix it. Oh, all right. So I also will make a claim that, it's not fair for most Americans, the way Social Security is set up. So limited death benefit options. If you die young or in early retirement, you paid in for your entire working career, and for your beneficiaries. If you're married, you'll get a payout. If you're not married and you have children, your children won't get a payout. So there's limited death benefit options. There are some, but it's limited. It hurts many lower and middle class families with shorter life expectancy. So again, paying into this for your whole life and then not collecting that full benefit. And the big component that I think is not fair is if you just invested the money as a private citizen and just said, give me all those payroll tax dollars, let me invest it, you would create substantially more wealth. And, to be fair, people will look at that and say, well, that's not a great idea. But, you think about like the state of California, a lot of the teachers' retirements, pension, firefighters fund, police retirement, all of those, they're investing their money. And Social Security is not. They're parking the money. And so that's one of the big problems. So let me just walk through a scenario. So I did all the math behind the scenes. I did this last year, so I'm reusing some of this data, but basically I made an assumption that says, okay, let's just assume you enter the workforce for the first time at age 22 with your full retirement being at age 67, and your beginning salary, your beginning wages would be around $40,000. And that every year you got a 4% inflation in your wage. So your wage just kept going up 4%, 4%, 4%. And then you started collecting benefits at age 67. By the time you got to full retirement age, your Social Security estimated payout at that time would be $7,362. So that's what's estimated. Now, I know nobody collecting today is getting that amount, but again, we're looking forward based on inflation and basically the cost of living has gone up substantially. So these payouts are getting larger and larger. Now, had you just invested this money and said, okay, I'm going to invest the Social Security tax money and it got a 6% growth on my money, and then you decided to take 5% out when you retired, you would get a check for about $8,200, or you would have an account value, roughly a hypothetical account value of almost $2 million. Now, the reason why I put that hypothetical value is that presumably you die at a younger age, or even before you collect benefits, that's something you can pass on to your spouse or to your children. The bottom item here is, what if you made 7% growth on your investments? Then your benefit would be about $10,695. And so that's really the key here, is looking at that. Had this money just been invested, and I'm using 6 and 7% because that's what a lot of the public pensions will use. So in that amount, it actually shows that you would receive a larger amount. And by doing so, not only would you get a higher payout, but it would actually make Social Security solvent. So how to fix it? So let's just talk about a few things. So while I do personally believe that privatization, meaning letting people control their money, is an effective option, it's not realistic at this time. So what's the next best option? I don't think it's going to happen, and I'm okay with that, because frankly, a lot of people aren't wired to be able to invest their money wisely, and so they might make poor investment decisions. So let's just deal with that's off the table. But let's let them invest the trust fund like a pension rather than in government bonds. So that's all that Social Security Trust Fund does, is they invest in government bonds. The average return on their assets in 2019 was 2%. The trust fund balance had almost $3 trillion. And so think about the earnings potential. If you can invest like a pension and earning 7% versus 2%, basically fixes the issue. Also, you can start moving full retirement dates back substantially. So if you're born in the 60s, move it to 68. You're born in the 70s, 69, born in the 80s, 70. And for every next decade, just move it back 1 year. Because the reality is we're living longer, we're living healthier lives. And so it makes sense to move back Social Security, because we're going to live a longer period of time. And so generally our working years are longer as well. And let's rename it a public pension, call it what it is. This is still stuck in an entitlement box. And I don't love that because we're all paying into it. We don't feel like we're getting an entitlement. We're getting back what we paid in. So again, just kind of want to run through that just from a hypothetical scenario. So that's really the run through of how to fix it is treat it like a pension, invest the money and be a little bit more and be way more strategic with this. And, even in periods of market volatility, the scenario to get a better return on your money wins out. Let me just check real quick to see if I have any questions. I do not, so I'm going to move on. Oh, one just popped in. So let's see here. So the question that I have is who has control over the invested funds? Well, that's a great question. Let me just answer live and done and hide that. Okay. Hold on, I'm just trying to clear my screen here. Why is that not? I gotta clear this out. Basically, while they talk about it as a reserve, it's just basically on the balance sheet of the federal government. So that's why they're investing in bonds. Essentially, what's happened is the money's come in, kind of gone into the general coffers of the government. They've reserved it, and they've just essentially kind of parked it into government bonds. Well, we know the government just keeps issuing government bonds, right? And so that's why, and the returns are really low on that. So it's essentially held in reserve, but not really. It's kind of this slush fund that the government uses, but they have made note of it. So I'm glad, thank you for that question. And you're probably not feeling super confident that money is being held wisely, and it's certainly not being invested wisely. So again, talk to your politicians. This seems to me like these are easy fixes, and I can't figure out why we can't do that. So so I got another question here is under your hypothetical, would the worker be able to select investments based upon like risk tolerance? That's a great question. That's kind of why I don't think privatization is probably the best idea, because if you take someone like a Warren Buffett, who's been an amazing long-term investor, he would make some of the arguments that you shouldn't have a lot of money in cash or in bonds. Anything that you need short-term should be invested in there. But one of the benefits of the Social Security Trust Fund is not only are they collecting around $1 trillion every year, this is a perpetual fund. So they can literally have a 10-year time horizon, a 15-year time horizon, a 20, a 30, a 40, a 50, a 100-year time horizon. So they can truly invest this money with a long-term approach. And so that's why the privatization component and giving people control, I don't think really works, because what happens if someone's a better investor than another person, then you kind of disadvantage that one person versus benefiting the entire group. So that's why I think you treat it like a pension. We're all invested in this together. All right. Thanks for those questions. I appreciate that. I'm going to